Okay, so it is recommended that you have completed the previous steps to get the most out of this. That said, I'm going to go ahead and proceed. So I'm just going to shed a little bit of light with respect to the scoring. You've got to make sure that you looked at the scoring rubric that I posted in the Test2 prep materials to get more information about how I'm using various critical writing/thinking standards and some other criteria that I have. So, the critical thinking and writing standards being relevance, clarity, precision, sufficiency, and accuracy, completeness and attentiveness being some that I have added, and then communication ethics being a criterion that I have added. When I'm thinking of completeness and attentiveness, I am thinking about general things that I said in the study guide about your essay/discussion/presentation of something from Plato's Apology about Socrates. And I'm thinking in particular with what I said with respect to the fact that whatever you write for this part of the test should come off as coherent and compelling. It should come off as, an intelligent discussion, an intelligent presentation that is coherent and compelling when finished. So as you can see for relevance, and again, look at the rubric to see what I mean and what a 15 out of 15 means for relevance. But you can see full points were given for relevance and for clarity. And clarity doesn't really mean that it's clear as to what you're talking about. When I use the word clarity, I'm really just using basic writing skills and mechanics that I can follow the basic idea that is in your sentence insofar as you've strung words together correctly. When it comes to I need more to understand, I really tend to use precision and sufficiency, but of course the more precise and sufficient you are, the clearer you will be. But again, I tend to use clarity solely for writing, grading your writing and whether or not I can follow what you're saying in terms of just basic sentence structure and how you string words together. Now precision, you can see that I have given this person an 8 for both, whether it's sample 1 or sample 2. Again, look at the rubric for details on that. Sufficiency 7. As far as I know, they're not being accurate, but there's the answer is lacking in precision, so much so that I almost want to give only half credit for accuracy, because for all I know, they could be misrepresenting, but since I can't prove that they're not, I'm not allowed to say that they're in fact inaccurate. That would be a fallacy in my reasoning. Completeness and attentiveness, they got the lowest scores they did for precision. They got 5 out of 15, and communication ethics 10 out of 10. Now look, one of the things I said is that your paragraph should come off as one coherent, at least for the part that's about the apology, should come off as one coherent paragraph that's compelling. And all this person did was copy the questions and then give the answers. So that's not a paragraph, and therefore it's not coherent, and therefore the answer, there's no discussion, there's no it's just like a question answer short answer item, and that's not what this is. Now here they did leave out the questions, as you should. You shouldn't include the actual questions in your paragraph, but the answer is still the same. I want you to imagine that I asked you just to use the questions from the excerpt, and I told you I wasn't going to give you the questions on the test. Or imagine some random person just gave you this list of statements here, and you never read the apology. You didn't even know that this was from philosophy. And you just see these 3 statements, or imagine you found these 3 statements on a piece of paper on a sidewalk. He is the wisest. He will try to find someone who's wiser. He doesn't know, and he doesn't think he knows. If you randomly found these statements on a piece of paper on the sidewalk, would you have any idea what the speaker is telling you? Now, probably not, unless you think he is maybe God, but even then, there's a lot of questions you might have. Okay, so I'm guessing most of you aren't going to say, well, I think the capital H means God. You really don't know, and even then, you can't be sure that it is God, and even then, we don't know why this is being written, what the significance of it is. Who is this he, right? We're wondering, well, who is this he? Why is he motivated to find someone who's wiser? And how does he come to the conclusion that he doesn't know or doesn't think he knows, or not necessarily how does he come to the conclusion, but, well, that's linked to answering my other question, but also, why is it important to say this? I don't know. Okay, so the questions that you're given, like these 3 questions in the excerpt by Lawhead, if you're answering the questions, then you're getting to the content that I need for an answer to have an intelligent conversation, but that's not enough. And so we're going to go to another answer to see like what the issue is. Oh, and again, one more thing. Yes, it's not in a list-like format, but another issue with completeness and attentiveness is that this person does not have any transitions to help make the paragraph, coherent. All right, so let's go to sample 3. Socrates is told by the god that he's the wisest. Well, now I've got some details. Now I know who told what to whom, right? So I know that Socrates is the one that was told that he was the wisest by whom? God. So I've got some details, so precision's a bit better. Now I've got a transition. Upon hearing this, so I'm like, okay, so this is connected to this. He said, Socrates was told something, and this leads him to make a what? A decision. Well, what is the decision? Well, the details that we already have. So then we see again another transition. As a result, so I know that his decision that he doesn't know or think he knows is tied to an earlier decision that was to try to find someone he was wiser. So now we're getting coherence through transitions, and I've got some more details and hence clarity with respect to the non-writing aspect of it, the non-mechanics of writing, as to, what's going on with the initial claims that were made in sample 2. So, if you note, I do believe, yes, you can see that what the speaker has done here is incorporated wording from the first question, right? If you look at the first question, it says, what did God say about Socrates through the voice of the prophetess? From the question in the sample, we have Socrates is told by the God. So it is highly recommended that you incorporate wording from the questions to show me that you are answering the questions. And in doing so, you're going to be adding details that I'll be looking for and hence increase your precision score. All right, so you can see that nothing changed with respect to sufficiency, right? There was an improvement with precision, and completeness and attentiveness did get some improvement. And this score, as you saw, this resulted in the score of a B. Okay, so sample 4, as you can see, the answers are getting more elaborate. They're longer. One reason why I give you sentence minimums in various items like dialectics, journals, and whatnot, is because I'm trying to get you to meet the standards of precision, efficiency. Okay, so if I give you a minimum, it's not because I'm obsessed with numbers and like to count sentences. It's because I'm challenging you to give details and to adequately develop your thoughts or ideas or the thoughts or ideas of others. All right, so in this sample, what is so good about this example here? Well, in this example, we get right here some details, what I'm going to call textual context. So now I know that the speaker is telling us or referring to a work called the Apology, right? So that's an improvement right in and of itself, just right there. So I'm getting some textual context. And then, of course, we've got, upon hearing this, so again, we still have that transition, Socrates decides that he will try to disprove this claim by the god by finding someone that is wiser than himself. Now, this is maybe making you think like, it sounds wordy. In fact, doesn't this contradict what you said about eliminating excess verbiage when it comes to clarifying arguments? Well, you missed an important point, or maybe you forgot it with respect to the argument that focused on clarifying arguments. So, and that is that when we're talking about philosophy or doing philosophy and trying to shed light on a view, we want to have transitions. We want to have maybe some repetition, so long as the repetition is iterating and clarifying, and we want to have good, beautiful prose that makes it easy to follow someone's train of thought. So what we're doing here in this part of the test is we are not trying to clarify an argument. Therefore, we do not want to get rid of excess verbiage. Excess verbiage has a place in philosophy, and that's when you're writing your prose, an essay, a paragraph. That adds what's called fluidity to a reading, which can make it easier to follow thoughts. And so here, this is definitely going on. So we've got our transition. Upon hearing this, then we've got Socrates, right? So Socrates decides that he will try to what? Disprove. And so here you can see that I added another key word from the second question, right? So I brought in disprove, and I could have said statement, from the question, but claim is a synonym for statement, so that's good. But again, bringing in some wording from the second question by adding the word disprove this claim by the God. And I could have said just disprove this claim, but I decided to use God because it builds coherence. I mentioned God here, and then I mentioned God again, so I'm tying back to something I said earlier. And then you can see that here I also added someone who is wiser than himself, wiser than Socrates. So I'm making sure, instead of just saying wiser than himself, I don't want the reader to think that Socrates is going to try to find someone who is wiser than the God. I want to make sure that the reader understands that Socrates is going to find someone that is wiser than himself, that is Socrates himself. And you can see that I added a little bit more elaborations, a little bit of, some of you might say repetition. This is understood in what I've said already. But again, I'm trying to be painstakingly transparent. That is showing that the God is wrong about him. About who? Socrates. You could say him/Socrates. So again, adding coherence, as I said. And then here what you get is I've changed the transition, and the transition that I've added here actually adds details from the text. So it's like, well, we get more details about the result of him trying to disprove the God's claim, right? It turns out that he went about and engaged with politicians in trying to disprove the God's claim. So I'm getting more details from the context. I'm getting more context about the initial claims that were and as they are presented in sample 2. And then you can see that I have, again, Socrates decides, again, tying back, building coherence, tying back to what I said earlier. Oh, yeah, he wanted to make this decision, right? He was trying to decide something, whether or not, he had made an earlier decision that he was going to try to disprove something, and then based on this decision, he makes another decision. So, he's making these decisions in light of something he's heard. And then again, you can see that I have he himself to make sure that we understand that he's talking about himself at this point and not necessarily directly what the God said. So yeah, this is an A-level answer. And you can see that I've highlighted the fact that sufficiency was improved. So again, look at the rubric to see exactly what I mean. You don't want to use your own definition of sufficiency. You want to use my definition to get inside my head in terms of how I grade, how I apply these concepts. And you can see here that I've given full points for completeness and attentiveness because it is written in a paragraph. Internal transitions are being used to add coherence. I'm finding this answer very compelling insofar as it is a philosophical discussion of sorts. We might want to say more of a philosophical presentation of ideas or philosophical presentation of something that Plato said about Socrates. All right, so let's get to our perfect answer. These are very hard to get, but they are possible. I want to show you what one looks like. Now, I personally do not know that I would focus on getting this perfect answer. If you're an A student, you might want to focus on getting an A answer. But if you want to go for the perfect answer, you can go for it, but don't use too much of your time. Don't use so much time trying to get the perfect answer that you don't get the full points on other things or maximize your score on other things. All right, so in this work, what is good about this work? Or about this, I should say, piece? Well, you can see that there's more details. Okay, so the student is showing off just a little bit more, giving him a little bit more context for the initial claims made in sample 2. Not only do we get the title of the work, but the student shows that they know it's a philosophical work and that it was created by Plato. Then the student is showing off a little bit more. They're saying, well, what I'm about to talk about comes from the first paragraph of this excerpt. So again, building coherence, we've got the apology referring back to here. We've got a little bit more detail from the text. We say it's not just the fact that the God made a claim, but in the story we're told that the God made a claim through the voice of a prophetess. So again, show a little bit more contextual detail. Not necessary for an A-level answer, but for that perfect answer where you're just excellence is emerging. That is a detail to include. And then, of course, we've got the same information plus a little bit more. Socrates is wisest. Well, the God is not telling Socrates that he's the wisest of all beings, which would include the gods, but of all men. And then we get a little bit more detail about Socrates' reaction to this initial claim, right? We find, here it is conveyed that Socrates confused about the meaning of the god's claim, so that's adding more detail. And then we get some more wording from the second question, which is proposing, right? You see, look at how I'm incorporating wording from the questions to add detail, to show the professor that I'm dealing directly with the questions, trying to adequately develop my response. Here I did decide to use the word statement from the question as well. So then he, of course, Socrates thinks of God's claim as a riddle. So again, adding more detail. I have that word decision still in there. And then add even more detail that, I have still the detailed riddle, but coherence building. I say riddle again because I mentioned riddle over here. So we understand that Socrates thinks of the claim as a riddle, and then we see that he decides to deal with the riddle with what? A strategy of looking for someone who is wiser than himself. Then you can see there's a little bit more elaboration going on here, which is nice. Adding detail, really teasing out the connection in the thinking and what's going on in the story. Adding coherence. I've got God's statement again, wiser, referring back to some stuff that was already set up here. Then I've got a nice transitional phrase here. Socrates first applies this strategy to some politicians. So again, repeating some words. I've got first applies what? The strategy. Well, had I talked about a strategy already? Yes, it's over here, right? So, coherence building through word choice, word usage. Again, okay, so we already mentioned that we included politicians in our discussion in the last sample. But notice some more details that I'm getting, including one that others would say is most wise and who himself thinks is the most wise. Okay, so now I'm getting more details. Not only now do I know that Socrates tried to disprove the God statement by going to the politicians first, but that he includes in his engagement with politicians one who's supposed to be very wise and thinks himself to be very wise. So again, showing off, bringing in more details from the text. Now we get another nice piece of transition here. This brings us to the second paragraph, which also shows off the student's knowledge of the text, the original text. Again, another great piece of transition after interacting with that particular politician, the one I've already highlighted, and others, right? Socrates decides, so again, I see, the decision-making process. There's decisions being made by Socrates as a result of hearing about this claim that the God has made, or this belief that the God has, that an advantage he has over politicians in general. Now notice, again, I have brought in some words, a key word from the third question. What is that? An advantage, what? That he has over the politicians in general. Because it's not an advantage that he thinks he has over just the first politician that he examines or engages with, but as a result of engaging with many in general. And then notice also that I have more details here, showing off more. It's not simply that he decides that he doesn't know and that he doesn't think he knows, but that he doesn't really know. So, we're getting a clue from Socrates here. You can say, yeah, we can all say we know, but do we really know? And you can say you think you know, but do you think you really know? And so you can see that I'm adding some details because he does say really know about the what, the beautiful and the good. So you can see here in this response, full points were given for precision, bringing in more details to help us to better understand, the initial claims that were made in sample 2, sufficiency for more adequately developing the discussion, teasing out the various aspects of the story and what Socrates was thinking and why he did what he did and what he concludes. That's all I've got for you. Again, you needed to be looking at the rubric to get the most out of this, and looking at the original text is important. One thing I want to emphasize is that the original text that is in the reading gives you all you need to do. If you go and do some investigations and look at what others have to say about these paragraphs, in my judgment, you're making it harder on yourself than you need to. You can go down all kinds of roads that you don't need to go down to. I've chosen this text in this reading because it's fairly straightforward. So don't distract yourself, or worst case, send yourself down an irrelevant path, an incorrect path, especially since I don't even know what you're looking at. You may form an incorrect idea or perception of something. So focus on the text. Show me that you have read the text. This last answer does that particularly well. Show me that you've read the text. Do that. Focus on the text. Also, keep in mind that I have chosen to show you what the score would be out of 100 points. On the exam, the score will be 20 to 30 points for this essay item. So keep that in mind. I'll be judging you and giving you either 20 out of 20 points, which would be 100% of possible points for that item, or 30 out of 30 points, which would be 100% for that item.